Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be creating a controller, a REST controller, and then we're going to create a service and then also a repository. So what we can do is, using the entity or the object that we created called person in our last video, we can go and create a payload using something like Postman, or you could use the command line as well to go and use a curl command. You need to do something to push data to hit your REST endpoint. Then when your REST endpoint is hit on your server, it'll go from the controller to a service layer. That service layer might do something extra, but most of the time it's just a middleman. And then finally it will go and hit your repository. And in your repository layer is where you want to be putting stuff into a database, saving stuff to a database, retrieving things from a database. It's always interacting with some sort of data storage, your repository. So usually a type of database, it could be a relational database, could be a non-relational database. But in this case, we're going to be using a relational database using the in-memory H2. So the first thing we need to do, once we have our person class created, we need to create a person controller. Once you've got your person controller, you need to go and springify it a little bit. So that means adding in a few annotations. So we're going to say at REST controller as our first one, and then we're going to also add another annotation called request mapping. Once we have both of those, then we want to actually go inside our class and create a method. This method can be called anything, so we're going to just call it something random at the minute. And I see there's a problem with that, so that's a bit better. Let's go and create our method now. So this is going to be a public method. Just for the sake of this, we're going to call it something random, and then we're going to change it. So we'll just call it haha, and it's going to return something, and that something that's going to return is going to be a list of persons, but for the minute we're just going to get it to return a string so we can test it out using Postman. And once we've got that, we're not going to take any parameters now or later, and then we're going to add in a return statement. So the return at the minute is going to be a string, and it's just going to say haha. So it's going to be called the same as the method, and we'll just put a semicolon there, and we'll stick 1 2 3 as well as the response. So now this should work. We just need to add in one more thing, which is a get mapping, because we're going to do a get on this. So if we just use the annotation get mapping, and we could put in something in here. So we could have something like this. We could say ha, like this. So our method is called haha, our endpoint is called ha, and it'll return haha 1 2 3. So I'm just going to run this, and I think this should work. It looks okay, but let's just double check and test this simple example before we try and go any further with using our person class and trying to return a person. So this is up and running. So let's go to Postman now and test this out. So our endpoint is localhost. It's run on port 8080, and if we just go back, you can see that we're using this get mapping as ha. So we need to put that at the end like this. So if we go and hit send, you can see we get haha 1 2 3 back. So if we had something like this, we wouldn't get any response back. It'll give us a 404 saying that it doesn't exist, which is true, it doesn't exist. So we just test that again. We can see returns the same. So now we want to go and maybe change this to something a little bit better. So we change this to person, and if we go and we have to rerun our application, our Spring Boot application, every time we make one of these changes, otherwise there'll be no difference in Postman here if we don't. So that's running again. So if we go and try and reach this again, it's going to say it's not found. That's because we're after deleting it and we're after replacing it with the endpoint person. So now person returns haha 123. So our next step will be to return something that's not just a string like this. It would be an actual person. So to do that, we want to first of all create a service class, and then we want to go and create a repository. So the next thing we want to do is create our service class. So we're going to just name that person service. So again, once we've created our new person service class, it means we're going to have to add in another couple of annotations. So the first one at the minute is just going to be @service, like this. And then within this class, we want to go and have some sort of method. Again, we can call this anything. We're going to call this public, and we're going to just call it haha1 for the minute. And this is going to return a string. And we're just going to take in no parameters for this, and we're just going to return back a string. So return, and our string will say haha 1 2 3 4 5, and we put our semicolon at the end. And now we want our controller to go and call this service class. So to do that, we need to go back into our person controller, and then within our person controller we now need to add a new field. So the new field is going to be the person service itself. So to do this, we're just going to go inside the class, and we're going to use another annotation, and it's going to be called @autowired, and this will inject in our person service as one of our class members. So to do this, we just say public, and we'll call it person service, like this. It's going to be called, it's going to be a type person service, and then we're going to call it person service as well. So it's going to just have the smaller lowercase p for the actual name of the variable. So now we no longer want to return this 1 2 3, because if we, let's say we rerun the application, right? When we run it and test it, it will still give us back this haha 1 2 3, which we don't want. So if we go and just test that again, you can see it's haha 1 2 3. We want to get rid of this. We no longer want it to return that exact string, but we want to return our person service dot haha1, and haha1 is our method that we've created here, and this haha1 will return haha 1 2 3 4 5. So now that we've got that, we can rerun our application again, and now when we hit this exact same endpoint in Postman, it should return haha 1 2 3 4 5. So it looks like it's up and running. So now you can see it's 1 2 3 at the minute. We go and hit this, and now it's 1 2 3 4 5. So that's good. Now our next step is we want to add in an interface, and our interface is going to be our repository. So again, it's going to be in the same package or the same folder, person. So we just go new, and we're going to say Java class, and this time we're going to select interface, and then we're going to call it person repository. Now once we've got that created, we need to go and extend from the JPA repository, and we're going to put an annotation up here of @repository. Now that we've got that, we need to add in something for our JPA repository. So we're going to add in the type that it's going to take in. So the type will be person, and then we also need to add in the ID, or the type for that ID. So if we go to our person class, we can see for our person class, our primary key, our unique identifier, is this ID, which is a long. So we need to pass in person and long. So if we go back here and just do this, person, comma, long, like this, and that should be okay now. So another thing we probably want to do is to go back to our service. So now, rather than hard coding in this string here, having haha 1 2 3 4 5, we want to make this return something from the repository. So to do this, we're going to have to go and auto wire again, but this time we're going to be auto wiring the person repository. So to do this, just go at auto wired and then put in person repository. This is going to be named the same, and now we're going to return this person repository here. We're going to call a method on that repository. So there's built-in methods on each repository. So you'll see when you look at this, I'm not creating a method in here because there's just automatically some methods created that need to be used for most applications. So if I wanted, I could create a custom method in here if there's like a certain thing that I really want. But if I just want to select all the elements, so all the persons or all the people, then by default I can do that by calling a method called findAll, like this, which is super handy, I think. Now it's complaining at the minute, and it's complaining because it probably doesn't like my return type since it's a string. Is it? Yeah, so it's saying that this would return a person, which is true. So we're no longer just returning a string, we're returning a list of people. So we change this return type to person. Now we also need to change our string to person in our controller as well. So this no longer returns a string, this returns a person. And if we go back to our service here, it still doesn't like it. Oh, sorry, findAll doesn't return a person, it would return a list of people. So I just need to put list in front of that as well. And then things should be okay. It seems to be happy with that. And I also need to change the same thing in the controller, because that returns a list as well. So now we're getting close. I guess we need to import lists as well. So this is the type of list that you want to import as well, just to make sure that you're importing the right type of list. It's java.utils.list, and is list imported in here? It is. Okay, so now I think if we go and rerun this again, we should be able to hit this endpoint, and currently there's nothing in our database. So while we won't get any information back after hitting our endpoint here, we should receive like an empty data set, so an empty list, which would be represented using two empty brackets, square brackets in Postman. And that's exactly what we see, which is good. So now that we know that's working, we can add in a new endpoint. And we can add in our new endpoint to this here. So it would be within our controller. And what we would do is we would say, rather than using get mapping, we would use post mapping. So post mapping would be when we want to go and add something into a database using a post request, rather than getting something from a database using a get request. So you can use whatever extension you want to your URL. For this, we might just use the same one. So we might just copy and paste this. So it's going to be person as well, only this time we're going to have to change the type. So we'll say public, and this will be just a person. that we're going to be sending in. It's not going to be a list of people, although we could create another endpoint that would return, or that would send in a list of people, but for now we're not going to do that. So we could say, again, this method name doesn't matter, so it could be anything. We're gonna clean it up at the end. So now that we've got that, now we need to call this person service, and we need to go and create a new person. So similar to this, we're going to have return person service, and then we're going to call, not find all this time, but we're going to call create person. So create person does not currently exist, so I'm actually going to stop here just because it might make more sense for me to go and create that method for you following along in the service class first. So I'm just going to leave that there, and I'm going to jump into my service class, and now we can create our create person class. So I'm going to say public, it's going to return a person, it's going to be called create person, it's going to take in a person that we're going to call person, and then we want to do some magic inside here. So our magic will be return person repository dot save, and we're going to use the person that we've passed in. So this is the person that we've passed in. That's what we're going to send off to our person repository. And again, similar to our find all, if you look in our person repository, you're not going to see this save method, right? If we go to it here, you don't see any save method. There's no save method here. It's just one of those default methods that is nearly used by everyone that uses Spring Boot and uses repositories. So it's just built in there. You kind of need to know about it. It's not here for you to see if you're just looking at the class. So now that we've got that, we probably want to rename this haha1. So maybe we could call it something like find all people. That might be a slightly better name. And if we go to our controller, we could say find all people, and we could name this find all no, not person, find all people as well. So now that naming is a little bit better. So now here, if we try and continue with this statement from person service, we'll create a person, and the person that we're going to pass in is what we're passing in here with Postman. So to go and get that to work, we use another annotation called request body. So if we say request body, this one here, and now we need to tell it what we're passing in. So what are we going to be passing in Postman? Well, we're going to be putting in a person. So what does a person have? A person has, if we check up here, he has an ID, a name, and an age. So the constructor takes in a name and an age. So we'll be passing in a name and an age. So here, let's type person, and we're going to just call it person as well. And then for our return, we're going to say we want to use the person service dot create person, and we're going to pass in person. What's wrong with that? Oh, I'm after putting that in the wrong place. That's not supposed to go in there. It's supposed to go into here, because it's the method that's going to be taken in. This is our creating our person. So I'm just going to grab this, copy this, place it in here, and then our return will be create person, and now we're going to pass in person in here. So now that looks a bit better. So I think that might work. So let's rename this as well. Let's rename it to create person. So that looks good, but there's only one way to make sure, and that's to rerun our application and make a couple of requests using Postman and see what happens. It doesn't always work the first time. There's usually some small little issue or thing you miss, but let's give it a go. Let's see, does the get still work at least? So we can see the get still works. Now we're going to switch to our post, and then if we go to our body here and we type in raw and we go down here and we put in JSON, now we need to pass in person name and an age. So if we go back to here, where are we getting person name and person age from? So it's name here and it's age, and it's not called person name, it's just called name. So if we look at this, name and age, that maps to the same as our constructor here for our person, which is name and age. So they both look good. So maybe it will work first time. Okay, so we've sent in this information, and then it has responded back with what it created. So it created the ID automatically first. That's why we didn't have to pass it in. And we've got a name of Ryan and an age of 24. So if we were to change this, let's say we were going to pass in a second person, we could put in Amy, and she might be 25, and we send that. We can see that it gives us an ID back of 2, Amy 25. So now if we were to switch from post back to get and send that, now we get an error. So this is something that was unexpected. So this time we're not getting our full list of people back. So if we go back to our server, so looking back at our application, we can see it's failed somewhere because we've got this log out here. But if we scroll up to the error, we can see that this is where the error and the problem has occurred. So just to go over here, we can see that it's given out about no default constructor for entity. So entity is this person class where we use the @entity annotation, and it's talking about that there's no default constructor. So while we have got this constructor here that creates our new objects, we've got no default constructor, and it seems like it's having an issue with that. I thought it created a default no argument constructor just out of the box, but seemingly it doesn't. So, or at least it's having an issue at the minute. So just go and create a constructor, and we're just going to say select none. So now we have our constructor that we're going to use, and then we have our constructor here that will take in nothing and do nothing. So let's go and rerun this again, and hopefully that'll be all the problems we see. So it's up and running now. So if we go back to Postman, we go to post, we're going to submit Ryan again. We're going to do it the same as last time. We're going to say Amy as well. She's 25. Send that, and now we're going to do a get. See, can we get both of these back? And we do. Brilliant. So that's one way that you can create a RESTful endpoint to go and put data into a database and retrieve data back from a database. I hope you've gained something from the video. If you liked it, leave a like, subscribe, and have a good day.